and welcome back to my writing channel. Today I'm going to be fulfilling a promise that I made to you a long time ago, actually, several months ago now. I made a video all about some of the things that I now consider very big mistakes that I did in my past first drafts while I was first drafting some of my past novels. And I compared them to better habits that I have hopefully developed or started developing now. And I explained a little bit why I think those things are mistakes and definitely derailed or just hindered my first drafting. So I told you that I could do one for revisions as well. I am still in the process of revising that same novel that I was referencing for my first drafting. Revisions are still going ahead. Definitely have gotten slowed down this fall. It's been quite a nightmare, actually. But I'm still going strong. It's just going strong and slow. But I do finally now feel like I am ready to do this video because I have refined my revisions process a little bit more as I've been doing these revisions. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say that word a lot in this video. I can already see it coming. Long story short, I can definitely pinpoint some of the things that I'm doing better now than what I did in some of my past revisions. Obviously, everybody has a different process. Every writer is gonna do things differently. So if you find that one of these things maybe is not as much of a mistake for you, that's cool. Everyone has their own process, but I am gonna be telling you why I think they're mistakes. Without further ado, let's get into the 5 huge mistakes that I have made in my past revisions. The first really big mistake that I made with all of my past novels and my short stories and papers and essays that I wrote for class was thinking that all my draft needed was a little once-over. A few touch-ups here and there, just a bit of tweaking and beautifying. That is not what revisions are all about, and I realize it now more than ever, and I probably still have even more growth ahead of me in realizing just how much can change in revisions. Ooh, and the sun is coming to make me look like a ghost. Inevitably, it seems like every time this topic comes up, there has to be at least one person who jumps in there and says something like, oh, but this really famous author said that they don't really revise their work. They write great first drafts. Or, you know, even their own writing, they'll feel like, well, I write really great first drafts. And, you know, that's the thing too. Sometimes the first draft's just great. Or, you know, I'm a plotter and I plot out everything, so I don't need to revise. Maybe there's a handful of people that that actually applies to, but for the huge majority of us, even the most talented among us, of which I do not count myself by a long stretch, even the best writers still have some amount of discovering the story to do. And even the most meticulous of plotters are still going to have things that they need to change afterward and move around. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely overhaul your story, but what I've realized is that there's so much that can change from writing that first chapter until writing the end. Revisions are really about refining the story, not so much the writing itself, not line by line editing. That is like the last step. I really discovered revisions with my last novel, my third one, and that's when I found some story flaws that I should have plotted out better and could have avoided some of the overhaul if I had just plotted a little bit better. But even so, some things I just kind of discovered as I was writing the story, and things kind of came together in ways that I didn't expect, even from plotting. It's different when you actually draft it from when you're plotting it. So there were a lot of things that I had to change, and I ended up rewriting so much of that book and overhauling so much and changing so much, and it was so much better at the end. Now, with my current work in progress, I have definitely done a better job plotting to where I have had less stuff to have to completely like destroy and, you know, rip apart and put back together in my revisions. But there's still a fair amount of stuff that I have changed. I have deleted chapters, I have added chapters, I have mostly just completely rewritten certain chapters and certain parts. I have added things about the characterization. I have discovered things about the characterization. Even my main character, I have discovered so much about her as I've been writing, and I've had to change things about the story because of it and how things have sort of worked in the story. There's actually one thing that I recently discovered. As you might know, if you've watched some of my previous videos, you might know that I am doing the reread where there's still quite a bit of revising to be done, but I'm doing it chronologically now. And I thought that I had most of my really big edits done and that this was going to be kind of a little bit more of a, I don't know, this is more of the beautify edit really. I discovered that I am going to need to rewrite something later in the book because it just does not quite work. So I'm gonna have to cut out probably a good chapter and a half, and a little bit of lead up that was happening in some of the chapters before that. I'm gonna have to cut it out and kind of rewrite it and make it something that is actually going to end up being more condensed. But the point is that the really big revisions and the changing of things and the more than just beautifying types of edits are definitely a key part of revisions. And I'm pretty sure this is something that 99% of writers can agree with me on. Revisions are more than just touch-ups. The second really big mistake that I have made with my past revisions is once I have realized all of these things that need to be fixed, once I realize it's going to be more than just a touch-up edit or a beautify edit, I have gotten very overwhelmed with all the stuff that I need to fix. Especially when you're just coming off that high of finishing the first draft, you have it down, you feel like your story is actually on a page. I mean, it's an amazing feeling and you should absolutely revel in that feeling and celebrate and reward yourself because finishing a first draft is amazing. But then going into edits, it can be very disappointing and quite a lot to kind of absorb when you start looking back at your story and you realize all of the stuff that now needs work and that isn't quite up to your standards. With my current work in progress, I kind of avoided some of this because I didn't have too unrealistic expectations when I finished the first draft. I was already making notes for my revisions. I was already realizing some of the stuff that I was going to need to fix. I was very realistic about it because I am starting to get a lot more experienced with the concept of drafting and revising and all of that, and that's just part of it. So even as I was first drafting, I was under no impression that this was going to be the hardest part of the entire process. I knew that really difficult edits were coming. With my past works though, the novels and the short stories, sometimes when I've reached that editing stage and I sort of realize that, you know, this needs fixed or this needs fixed, or I find holes in my story and I realize, oh my God, I have plot holes and I have stuff that doesn't make sense, or I realize that I haven't portrayed something in the proper light and that it's going to be more than just a little touch up. It's going to be an actual semi-overhaul or just some big changes that I need to apply. And then I start getting overwhelmed and I start thinking, oh my God, maybe what I've just spent all this time writing is crap. The biggest reason that this can be detrimental is that it can make you want to quit, and it has made me want to quit. It can affect you even when you have a good draft, when you have a potential story there and you just need to kind of make it better. You need to find the things that are wrong and fix them and work on it. Every book that you pick up off the shelves has gone through this. None of those are first drafts. None of those are the first thing that the author wrote down on the page. It doesn't work like that. In those moments, it's best to take a step back, either, you know, stop that writing session, come back tomorrow, or even take a few days off, take a week off, take 2 weeks off, give yourself a break. Everybody needs a little bit of a vacation. Even if writing is a hobby, sometimes you need to take a vacation from it. The other thing I have learned to do is just to take it step by step, bite by bite, and to try not to look at it as the overall big picture, because that can be a lot to take in. Another really big mistake that I've made in a lot of my past revisions is basically letting myself get completely burnt out of a project. This comes from impatience. This is a problem that I have. I have said it before and I will say it again. I am not the most patient person, and I have had to develop this skill so much since really deciding that I wanted to be serious about writing, because writing is not an impatient person's game. So I've had to kind of fight against some of my natural instincts when it comes to that. But where my impatience comes out to shine again often is in revisions. This is something I got a lot better at with this draft, and I really forced myself to just put on the brakes, because what I do, or what I have done in the past a lot, is I get to revisions, I have this full beautiful draft in front of me. The first draft, it feels like I'm so close. I'm so close to having a revised, beautiful final draft. I'm so close to being able to send queries. I'm so close to being able to share it with people and get feedback and get beta readers and critique partners and all of that stuff that I so badly want to do. And this sense of urgency starts building, and it builds a little bit more and it builds a little bit more, and I start getting into my revisions and it seems like, you know, I have this, and then I'm done, and then it's a beautiful draft and it's finalized and it's great. And those things will take time. And even as I know that it will take time, I'm letting this sense of urgency build. I push myself and I push myself and I fight for this pace that is just not one that I can possibly accomplish, and I force myself into a state of burnout, basically, to where I get to a breaking point and I can no longer do it, or at least I feel like I can no longer do it. This is kind of similar to the Overwhelm one, but it's definitely stemming from different issues, because it's not like I don't want to do all the things that I realize I need to do to my draft. I just think I can do them a lot faster, and I want to do them a lot faster. And then I get to a point where I've worked myself too much. I'm tired of the draft. I'm tired in general. I have a lot of other stressors going on, and it definitely does hurt my draft, because it will get me into a point where I either experience some form of writer's block and feel like I can't go any further, or maybe it'll push me into a state where I feel like this draft is not worth it anymore because I can't do it as fast as I told myself I should be doing it, or I expected myself to. It causes so much unnecessary stress, and burnout in general is just something you don't want to put yourself in. I've done it with YouTube, I've done it with my writing, I've done it with other things in my life. It's something that, you know, some of us are maybe more prone to than others, but all of us have been there. All of us have pushed ourselves into a state of burnout at one point or another over something that we probably love. Since then, I have tried to be so realistic about my goals. I hope that shows through my videos, and in fact, in some ways it probably shows in negative ways, because I haven't uploaded every Saturday for the past several weeks, couple of months, I've been kind of irregular about my videos, which is not something I wanted to do, but I was kind of teetering on the edge of burning out. I just made a conscious decision that, okay, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen, that's cool. The story's still good, the ideas I have are still good, and I'm going to get them on the page eventually. I just need to kind of pace myself. A quick draft is only a good thing if it's an efficient draft and if it's a realistic draft. That's it. All right, let's talk about one that is a little bit embarrassing because it has definitely led me to get myself stuck in some tight little corners. In past revisions, I have definitely made some very big decisions on a whim. Okay, on a whim might be a little bit harsh. It's not like I've completely just, grabbed a random idea and run with it, but kind of, in a way, sometimes. Before I really started to get the hang of revisions, I would sometimes notice those flaws that inevitably were in my first drafts, especially my early first drafts, because I did not make as much of an outline and a plan before I started that first draft. I would notice a mistake, I'd notice a plot hole or something that I needed to fix or something I didn't like about a character or about the story, and I would come up with a solution. I would, maybe change my outline if I had one, update it really quickly, or think about maybe a couple of things that would change, and then I just run with it and I would go. And to me, that is on a whim, even though technically I did do a little bit of thinking. I did not fully comprehend sometimes the ripple effects that happen when you make some of these changes and revisions. Even as recent as my last draft, where I really did understand story a lot better, and I did understand that changing one thing here and there could definitely break something. There were a few times in revisions when I thought of a solution and I really liked the solution. That was usually the problem, because the solution I come up with I thought was so much better than the solution I had originally in the first draft. And I would really like it and I'd go with it. And nearly every time I would do something like this, there would be at least one part of the ripple effect that I didn't fully think through. And I would happen upon it later in revisions, sometimes much later in revisions, and I would realize, crap, that thing that I changed a month ago, or that thing that I changed 2 chapters ago, now has messed up this other thing. And sometimes the fix would be fairly easy, but other times it actually would really break something in the story in a way that took a lot of effort then to fix. I'm not saying that this is something you can completely avoid, because sometimes you come up with such a brilliant solution, you just gotta make it work no matter what. Other times it's the only solution that really makes sense, or that, is gonna work in your story. And therefore you have to then deal with all those ripple effects, and you have to fix the other things that end up being broken. But my God, it is so much easier to do that when you do it consciously, and when you think about those things and you understand the full effect of that ripple before you make the change. If not only just to feel better in your head about it and to fully, consciously accept the consequences of that change, of that new solution, but also just because sometimes it can make things easier. Sometimes it actually affects how you apply that very change. It could be this exact same solution you had thought of, but you kind of make it happen a little bit differently to where it doesn't break as many things, or it doesn't break them quite as badly later in the story. The 5th and final mistake that I'm going to be talking about in this particular video is not making a plan. By now I am a plotter. I am a massive advocate for outlining. That is definitely what works best for me. But one thing I haven't talked about quite as much is the importance of also making a plan when it comes to revisions. And this is something I've also taken longer to discover. I discovered outlining before I discovered outlining revisions, or planning for revisions. But it's something that, it's a big difference, I think, between comparing my revisions for this current work in progress and my revisions for my last novel, for Legend Says. Those revisions had a lot of ups and downs, as you can probably tell from the past 4 points that I've been talking about, the mistakes that I was making, most of which apply as well to Legend Says. But I'll admit that I think a lot of the reason those revisions took so long and so much energy out of me, and then didn't end up being fully successful in the end, part of it was story issues, which is the reason I'm not working on it anymore. But also, I think the revisions were just a little bit aimless. I had a lot of things to fix, but I didn't necessarily have a full plan of how I was going to fix them, what order I was going to fix them in. I was very much just kind of hopping around and fixing here and there, changing on a whim sometimes, and I really just lacked structure. And with my current work in progress, my Eliana story, I definitely came up with a plan, and it's not one I always stick to. I've said it a million times. I've made a revisions plan video and then told you in, more recent videos the things that I did not do according to plan, or that I've changed in my plan. But I think just having a plan and kind of, you know, starting somewhere with structure and then allowing myself to change it in a similar way to I do with my outlines. As I'm writing the first draft, as I'm revising, I'm changing stuff in that outline. That's fine, it's flexible, but I'm not just sort of wandering aimlessly into revisions. Part of the plan is deciding what order you want to do things in. This was important for my current work in progress, kind of deciding what things were the big issues that needed to be dealt with first, what things were more important. But I think a lot of it was far more than just chronological. It was also just getting everything down on a page and figuring out the depth of the edits that I needed to do. This has changed a lot, of course, it's always changing. And as I said earlier, the thing that I have to change later is not something I thought I was ever gonna have to change, and I realized I needed to. But I think it just helps get at least an idea of what you have in front of you. With all that being said, I'm going to wrap up the video there. Those are just 5 things. That is definitely not the extent of all the mistakes that I've made in the past, or the mistakes that maybe I'm making right now and I just haven't quite realized it yet. So I can definitely do a follow-up video in the future on this. I can also do a follow-up on first drafting, especially whenever I start my next draft of something, which I'm not gonna think about right now because I'm gonna try not to get too far ahead of myself here. Definitely do let me know in the comments below if you can relate to some of these, if you've done them in the past, if maybe you are doing some of them and you're trying to kind of get past these mistakes and find better habits, or if you have other mistakes that you have made or are making and you want to talk about them in the comments below. Feel free to strike up a discussion there. I will be joining, as well as other people I'm sure would love to talk a little bit more about the revisions process. If you want to see more videos from me, definitely make sure you subscribe to my channel and you turn on notifications so that you can see every time I upload a new video. I generally do every Saturday, give or take some Saturdays, and I talk a lot about writing tips, advice, but also my experience, what I'm working on right now. I love to do writing vlogs as I'm doing my different writing or revision sessions. So if you're interested, please do join the community, and you can also follow me on Instagram for more. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another writing video.